The Hornets split the weekend. We take a look at the bad and the ugly, and plus we take a look at Doug Branson's notebook, all today on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
You are Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your pods. That includes YouTube. I'm Walker Mail. You can find me on WFNZ 12 to 3 with Wes and Walker. That's Doug Branson. You can get more of his Hornets thoughts on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. And we'll be taking a look at that Substack in just a moment going into the second segment. But we got to take a look at some good and some bad here, Doug, because we did get the win against Washington the third time around for the Charlotte Hornets, but they did not get the victory against Milwaukee. And normally you would think they're not going to get a win against the Bucks. Maybe you still felt that way, but they didn't have Giannis in this game. They didn't have Chris Middleton in this game. So you thought maybe there was a shot the Hornets could win. The starters did not step up in that one. They did step up against Washington. So if we were to look at the positive with Washington, I thought PJ Washington was very good. Very different from his performance against Milwaukee. 0 of 13 from the field against the Bucks, but at least the starters showed up. So let's go with the good, right? Let's start with the positive and then maybe trickle into the badness that was the Milwaukee performance from PJ Washington. I did think the starters, Terry Rozier, PJ, Mason Plumlee went 7 of 9 from the free throw line. Pretty big performance from him at the charity stripe when they only win by 1 point. So the starters, they finally stepped up, and they did so against the Wizards.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, three-point shooting was the story against the Wizards. They were knocking them down, including PJ, who was pulling up confidently and hitting three-point shots. And that's been the story all season. I mean, their offense has lagged behind everyone else. They're dead last in effective field goal percentage. And so much of that is because they can't shoot threes at the rate that they were last season. And over the past couple of games, you've seen even the three-point attempts start to drop off as they recognize that shooting, if you're not making a lot of threes, that shooting a lot of threes is going to harm your ability to actually defend as well. And so they've been putting their head down. Players like Terry Rozier, Kelly Oubre have been trying to get to the rim. But it also hasn't led to free throw attempts. This Hornets team also lagging behind in free throw attempt rate, and it's all meant bad offense. But we got a reprieve from that against Washington, where they were absolutely stellar, and then unfortunately it all came back against Milwaukee. And as you said, if you could define it in one player, if you could define what has happened with the Hornets this season in one player, it probably would be PJ Washington and his inconsistencies. I've got a little graphic graph to show you if you'd like to see it. From cleaningtheglass.com. This is PJ Washington's trend line, and don't worry, listeners, I will guide you through this as well. But on the Cleaning the Glass trend line for effective field goal percentage for PJ Washington, it is all up and down. I mean, it's just one game up, next game down, one game up, next game down, and the downs are way lower than the ups on the effective field goal percentage, and it's a lot of games spent below 30% effective field goal percentage, and it means all in total that he is generally well below the position average, which he's rated as a big on Cleaning the Glass. But even if he was rated a forward, he would still be below the position average on the season. And then I don't know if you can see this dot way down the graph in the lower right-hand corner, but that dot represents the 0 of 13 performance against Milwaukee. It was devastating.
Oh, I mean, when PJ went 0 of 13, I think we had a game like that against Phoenix, if I'm not mistaken, where maybe he went like 0 of 11, 0 of 12, maybe 1 of 12, something like that. So PJ is not completely foreign to the awful of most awful games. That does have such a big factor on your overall season average. And so PJ going 0 of 13, it really hurts him. And Doug, it's the 2-point shots, right? Like we saw this in the second season. PJ could not finish down low. He shot 48% from 2-point range in his sophomore campaign. That goes all the way up to, if you round up, 61% inside the 3-point arc last year. 47 overall, 37 from 3-point range. And now it's right back down to even a tick below what he shot his second season in the NBA. So the fact that he's shooting that poorly from 2-point percentage and still giving you a career low in 3-point percentage, that is what you're getting from an inefficient PJ. It's because he's taking 5 more shot attempts per game this year than he was last. He is experimenting with the step backs, with the dribbling and then walking right into a 3, with trying to drive more, right? But the expanded responsibility for PJ is hurting the efficiency. I don't think there's any doubt about it.
Well, and he just doesn't have the touch near the rim. I mean, that's really the thing. The step backs, the things that he's been taking from the mid-range have generally been okay. In that game against Washington and in the game against Milwaukee, the shots that he's missing at a high rate are the ones in between the nail and the rim. It's when he's going for these floaters and he just doesn't have the touch. It has been inconsistent. In fact, 5 of the 6 shots that he hit against Washington when he had a decent offensive game, all of those were 3-point shots. Only one of them very close to the rim.
Tough finish too. I believe went to the free throw line on his tough finish. It was great, but of course, the other shots that he missed mostly from inside the 3-point arc.
And look, I mean, how much of this is the injuries that have piled up on the Hornets forcing him into a role that maybe he wasn't comfortable with, probably taking a few more shots every game than was expected of him at the beginning of the season? How much of that is having an impact? But here's the thing. I think it's revealing that the Hornets were probably smart to wait on a contract for him instead of giving into his demands for an extension that were somewhere in the $20 million a year range. I think this is revealing that the more responsibility you give him offensively, it doesn't necessarily equate to more efficiency, and that's troubling if you're going to invest that much money into a player.
Yeah, I mean, once guys come back, I expect that to go right back up where it was last year, his efficiency, because last year it was good. And defensively, of course, PJ was good. So you're hoping to see that form again, but they just continue to miss so many guys. They still have a lot of players listed as out for these contests, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But still plenty of other things to take note of, especially when we go to Doug's notebook coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Doug will tell us some things he thought about Nick Richards, Terry Rozier, Bryce McGowan's actually getting some run in these 2 games. We'll get to that in just a moment. But this episode is brought to you by Turo. Turo is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. You can browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion, and you can book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip, and you can test drive that new electric. I'm struggling.
Oh boy, what's going on there? Are you underwater? Did you take a dive into a pool there?
I am underwater, and this podcast is going to suffer because of it, damn it, but I'm doing it because it's Locked On Hornets. You can test drive that new electric vehicle above water you've had your eye on to see how it fits in your everyday life. Terms and conditions, the exclusions, they apply as well. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. More Walker struggling coming up next.
This is Locked On Hornets.
This amazing photo of Mitch Kupchak standing next to Steve Clifford in what looks like I think if you typed into one of those AI image generators, shotgun wedding, this is the picture that would come up, because Steve Clifford looks absolutely
so good.
Shocked.
There's not a background, underrated part of this. It's just a blank white screen, so you're not having any Hornets graphics. You don't even have the courtesy to bring in
blank white faces, too. Blank white faces.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
All right, we're going to try to do this again. Thanks for making Locked On Hornets your first listen today. Make your next listen Locked On Sports. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On Sports and Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports today. So now I just messed up. But anyways, let's go to Doug's notebook. It's a real struggle. I apologize to everyone. Tried to give it a go this morning. Not feeling fantastic. My voice, it's running out. But now that's Doug.
I'm going to blame, we should just blame it on the internet connection. That's it. That's what it is. It's buffer. Your voice is buffering at this point.
We'll blame it
The
on
Hornets offense was buffering against Milwaukee. And I mean, I think
Perfect.
a lot of people who either maybe they watch the game and they don't understand, especially after the Hornets score 117 points to win against Washington. Yes, Washington did come back in that fourth quarter because of rebounding issues that have plagued the Hornets all season long, and some defensive issues as well. I mean, but luckily they got the steal from Kelly Oubre to seal that win against Washington, the steal on Beal to seal the deal from Kelly Oubre. But rebounding issues playing in there. Against Milwaukee, I thought, okay, no Giannis, no Middleton, no Holiday. This is like a perfect opportunity for the Charlotte Hornets to pick up a win in a series of games now where they have the offense hasn't been clicking necessarily, but they have been picking up a few wins, starting to get into a groove. And they couldn't do it against Milwaukee because Milwaukee was disciplined defensively. They were what Washington was not through 3/4 of that game. They were locking down the paint, saying, you're not going to get by us one-on-one. Doesn't matter if Giannis is out to guard the rim. We're going to protect it one-on-one. You saw Kelly Oubre, you saw PJ Washington, you saw Terry Rozier trying to get by their guy one-on-one, and it just wasn't working because Milwaukee was focused defensively. Look, those are, even though it was the Bucks backups, it's a championship team, right? I mean, a lot of championship experience, a lot of playoff experience, and I think some of those reserves leaned on that and tried to play it like a playoff game, and at least defensively, and they come away with the win. It was impressive to watch Milwaukee play defense.
Well, I mean, and they had the best defensive player on the court with Brook Lopez being out there. So 6 blocks from Brook Lopez in that game against Milwaukee, 14 points. And then Splash Mountain showed why he Splash Mountain with 3 of 5 from the 3-point arc. So, yeah, Brook Lopez, he was the best guy. When you have that type of anchor, your defense is going to outperform the opposing defense, especially when you're also without a lot of bodies. And Mason Plumlee and Nick Richards are some of the bigs there. What are some other things in the notebook you got?
Well, I just think the book is out on the Hornets offense, right? I mean, without so many of their top guys, Milwaukee clearly understood, hey, we cut the paint off at all costs. The Hornets don't have any bigs that can shoot. I mean, the lack of offensive versatility at the center position, we've been screaming about this for years now. But in this game in particular, I thought, not being able to play 5 out really hurt the Hornets' opportunity to get shots when they were cutting off the paint, or get good looks when they were cutting off the paint. And Clifford doesn't have a desire, probably doesn't have the personnel to really consider going small to try to counteract that. And they can't rebound when they're big, right? I mean, they can't rebound when they've got a traditional lineup out there. So it would probably be a nightmare to try to finish possessions defensively if they were to put PJ at the center position. But there's not even any kind of experimentation going on right now. And that's probably because you're down 4 or 5 rotation players every game.
What did you think of Terry Rozier's performance this weekend? Because I thought he did a lot of good things against Washington. And then even against Milwaukee, his shooting performance overall was better, but not from 3-point range, where he missed 6 again, 1 of 7. I thought there was some creativity from inside the 3-point arc. What'd you make of Terry?
Well, I think Terry, it's interesting. He's getting this like clutch 3 in the middle of the fourth quarter going. It's kind of a thing that has happened this season. He hasn't been the scariest of Terry. He's been more Scarrold Terry than Scary Terry. That's my new name for him, Scarrold Terry instead of Scary. Okay. Yeah, scared like Harold Terry. It's Scarrold Terry instead of Scary Terry. But in the middle of the fourth quarter, he can be counted on for a big 3-pointer that staved off that Washington run. Without that 3-pointer that Terry hit at about the 4-minute mark in the fourth quarter, it looked like Washington was just going to take it all the way and completely eviscerate what was at one point a 20-point lead deep into the third quarter.
Eric Collins loved it too, for sure.
Yeah, it was amazing. And so, at least we're getting a little bit of Scary Terry back, but it didn't show up against Milwaukee. He had a couple of opportunities. He wasn't the only one that missed shots in that fourth quarter, but they just couldn't get enough to make a run. And honestly, that's the most disappointing thing about the Milwaukee game was that it wasn't that they didn't win, because they weren't, even with all of those players out. I don't think Vegas had the Hornets as the favorite, even at home. Which I think should tell you a lot about where the Hornets organization is right now with missing all of those players. They weren't even favored. So had they lost, I guess I wouldn't have been super surprised, even without all those players out. But what disappointed me, and I think I was a little bit more disappointed than Steve Clifford after the game, who seemed more resigned to the fact that they lost. I was disappointed because they didn't even really contend for a lead. Like if they had gotten a lead at some point in the third or fourth quarter and then given it up, I would have been like, okay, injuries. But in this one, I'm like, man, you can't even muster up enough offense to even compete with what is essentially, the reserve team for the Milwaukee Bucks. Just super, I was super bummed about it.
Yeah. And by the way, just a big discrepancy between the two games that you see. How about only 4 turnovers for Charlotte against Washington? That was huge in a 1-point game. And then you had 14 against Milwaukee.
Well, and 14 is like not a terrible number. They
Not
probably
awful.
No, it's not. They probably want it somewhere around 11 or 12 per game. So, and the thing was, look at Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee, what did they finish with turnover-wise? I know they were giving it up a ton in this game. Yeah, they had 21 turnovers in this game. That just goes back to my point, Walker. How could they not possibly get back into this game? And the answer is you shoot 39% from the field. You shoot 21% from 3, 5 of 24, and they were stuck on 3 3-pointers made, I think, through most of the third quarter. I think they finally hit their fourth one sometime deep in the fourth quarter. Kelly Oubre, 1 of 5. Terry Rozier, 1 of 7. Although shout out to Kelly getting to the line, 11 of 12 from the line. But they're having to do these things to make up for the fact that they can't hit 3-point shots. I was doing this thing on playback.tv where I was kind of commentating on the game. A few people showed up for the Washington one. I've been kind of tech testing it to see if it's something we want to do in the future. But during that, someone was complaining about the defensive effort in the first half against Washington. And I'm like, yes, but they're hitting 3-point shots, which is what I've been saying all season. When you hit your threes, it covers up so many sins. The fact is the Hornets have been sinning, and they just haven't been hitting 3-point shots. And that's why they've been losing these games.
Just the PJ Washington box score is a thing to behold, not only for the 0 of 13 performance against Milwaukee, but how about 3 blocks, 3 steals, 5 assists, 8 rebounds for PJ, but then you see the 0 of 13. Ooh.
Well, let me say something. Let me say something, because I saw a few people on Twitter who were like, okay, if you're going to mention the 0 of 13, then you have to mention the 3 blocks and the 3 steals and the 5 assists and the 8 rebounds. No, I don't, because they lost this game. They lost this game by 9, and they were never in contention. And you know why? Because they weren't hitting shots. That's the name of the game. One of my favorite quotes of all time is by Roy Williams, former coach of my UNC Tar Heels, who said, hey, this game is pretty simple. You got to put the ball in the darn hoop. I mean, that's it. Like, you can't go 0 of 13. I'm sorry. I appreciate the 3 blocks. I appreciate the 3 steals, the 5 assists, the 8 rebounds, but none of those helped you get a lead.
Yeah, 0 of 13, 4 of 14 from Kelly. Hot. Those are the guys. Yeah, well, there you go. I can't match your energy. Please don't make me do that today, because I just can't do it.
And you can't let Pat Connaughton get an offensive rebound in the fourth quarter. You can't let Pat. He got an offensive rebound put.
You know
back.
About Pat Springs, though? Do you know about Patty Springs? I mean, do you know about his vertical being like top 5 combine number?
Fine, that's like fine. That? I don't care. I don't care. You cannot let Fat Connaughton get.
Oh wow! No, whoa, that's. I'm playing like Pat Connaughton right now.
Pat Connaughton get an offensive rebound put back in the fourth. Was it in the fourth quarter? Maybe it was in the third quarter. It was in the third quarter.
You were talking over my joke. I don't think you heard it, but I was saying I was playing like Pat Connaughton today. That's what I was playing like. Thank you. I knew you'd love it. All right. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Yeah. Well, what's coming up next?
We're going to be talking a little bit more about your notebook. That's what we're going to be doing. And but that's not before
I want to look ahead too. We got to look at, because Clifford mentioned something interesting. He said that they're looking at this stretch of games after they finally got the 2 days rest, and I believe that was after the Cleveland double overtime loss, that they're looking at this 11-game stretch before they go on the big road trip as like an opportunity to try to get back into the season, to get off that losing streak and to get back into the season. So I want to look ahead to the rest of that.
Plus, we'll tease a guest that we have coming up on Tuesday, one we have not had in a while. So we'll tease that as well. But of course, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline.
Yeah, betonline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer, the other football, and esports. We've got it all on betonline.net. And if you love sports podcast, I hope you love sports podcasts. You're listening to one. You can find those at BetOnline as well. They are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. More Locked On Hornets ahead.
Is Locked On Hornets.
But I have seen him go all the way up to number 10. That was. Is there a warning? Do we need to get out of here?
Okay, here's the thing. I don't know if you heard, but my watch went off, and I was trying to silence it, and then I accidentally hit ping the phone, and then the phone pinged, and now here we are. I'm doing my best, man.
It seems like you're doing your very worst.
Well, sometimes
it seems like I'm actively fighting you today to move.
Sometimes my best is my worst.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
The look ahead to the Hornets schedule, they do have the Clippers tonight with tip at 6 p.m., by the way. So the Hornets do have another game that they're going to be playing here after having quite the rest. They'll be playing. They have the back-to-back, Washington, then Milwaukee. They will have another game at home, again, only at 6 p.m. today. So they do have that game against the Clippers, on the road against Brooklyn. Then they'll be back at home against New York, playing on the road against Philadelphia, and then their next one. So the next, finishing out their next 5-game schedule here, they'll be back at home against Detroit on December 14th. What do you make of these 5 games on the Hornets schedule here, Doug?
It should be interesting. LA, they're trying to get some players back as well. Norman Powell, as of yesterday, was still out. Kawhi Leonard out. Paul George out. Luke Kennard out. So the Clippers have a long injury list as well. Can the Hornets take advantage of it? I mean, they weren't able to take advantage of a gift from the Milwaukee Bucks for rest. Can they take advantage of it against the LA Clippers? We will see tonight, and I'll be covering it on everyhornetsboxscore.com as well. And then, this is an important stretch for them because they've got Brooklyn, New York, Philadelphia, Detroit, Atlanta. Atlanta's not playing well either. Or not playing as well, and they've got problems. Apparently, Trae Young and the coach there are at odds. So, that is probably a more winnable game when we get to December 16th. But then after that, from December 18th until like the end of January, they are playing most of their games, a vast majority of their games, out on the road. And this road trip that they have starting December 18th is brutal. Denver, Sacramento, the Beam team, they are hot. They are scorching hot right now. The Clippers, the Lakers, and the Lakers are playing better. Portland, Golden State, all of those, and 3 of those are on NBA TV. I'm a little scared about that. But yeah, that road trip, I don't know that you could have picked a tougher slate of games for the Hornets. So there's no wonder why they've been looking for opportunities for wins in this 11-game stretch, because I think that Clifford recognizes that that road trip is going to be particularly difficult. And I wonder, they rushed guys back. It felt like they rushed DSJ back a little bit. They rushed LaMelo back, and then we had some re-injuries, and they've been gone. They obviously, there was a push either by Gordon or by the team to get Gordon back out there with the shoulder injury, and then that turns out it's a fracture, and now he's got to be out for a lot longer. But I wonder if there's any push to try to look at, in terms of timeline, to get guys back before that road trip to try to help out this Hornets team. Because if they don't get any help, Walker, I am frightened by what the scores are going to be on this road trip.
At some point, the tanking monster becomes too big to run away from. And the Charlotte Hornets, if you have all those injuries still affecting you, by the time, even if you go out west and have those guys return, you're still going to be the underdog in all of them, every single one of those games. I don't understand how you're going to be able to win a majority enough for you to be able, okay, we feel good about this road trip. It's going to be brutal for the Charlotte Hornets. It's just, the name of the game is getting guys back as soon as possible. And when those guys return, being as healthy as possible. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets today, making us your first listen. We appreciate that. Now make your second listen. To make your second listen, check out Locked On Sports today. Goodness gracious. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. We have Rod Boone tomorrow from the Charlotte Observer. He joins us to give us his thoughts on the Hornets season thus far. So we appreciate you listening to us once again. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with Rod Boone tomorrow.